Well, I was driving up the M1 to go and visit somebody in Birmingham. I was just about near Watford Junction, and one of the radio stations rang, and I just said, "You're joking. I don't believe it." And so it was a real shock. After seeing the Pope on television yesterday, it's the last thing I expected, actually. So I had to turn around. I used a roundabout, not a U-turn on the M1, and came back. And slowly, with the pressure of getting things ready for this evening, we'll celebrate Mass in the Westminster Cathedral at 5:30, and getting all of that ready now. It's dawning on me, that what could have happened a few months ago has now come about, and the Pope has died, and therefore there's a great sense of loss and sorrow being expressed by many, many people. King and Queen have sent a most wonderful message, having met him very recently. Yeah,
and significant, I think, that the depth of feeling in the King's message, of course, himself the head of the Church of England,
yes,
but obviously the two men finding much commonality there. What do you think that says about the way Pope Francis engaged with people of all faiths and none, really?
Well, it's true. I mean, he made real progress in relationship with Islam, and had some very high-level meetings in Egypt and in Iraq, for example, where he was explaining, I think, the richness of a shared belief in God. So some of the messages I've received this morning from the chief rabbi, from Muslim leaders, both Shia and Sunni. So he's touched into some of the universal qualities that people have, which is, a search for God, which is, one step back from that, a sense of being a spiritual being, a sense of being not people who are summed up in material things and instinct in everybody. We go beyond all of that. We know we do. And he's tapped into that and related common human experience to his mission as Pope and to the task of the Catholic Church.
Inevitably, when somebody of his stature dies, and popes, I think as well, we probably will have seen this throughout the past few decades, conversations come out about the impact, whether as a reformer or did they go far enough.
Yeah.
Where do you think he sat on that spectrum, as it were, when it came to what the Church needed for change in his more than a decade as Pope?
It's not a simple matter, that. I think, actually, in many ways, he was very much a voice for the continuing traditions of the Catholic Church and what it upholds. He probably dug a bit deeper into what is the human truth, the truth about humanity, which contained in the Catholic Church. John Paul II always spoke about Christ as the truth about the human person. But Pope Francis went further than writing and managed to almost enflesh that principle that what Catholic truth is about is the dignity of the human person. It's about the mercy of God for everybody, and therefore it's about hope. There's no place we can be in which we should give up hope. To me, some of that was summed up in the last pastoral action of his life, when he left the Vatican and he went to visit the prison, the Regina Coeli prison in Rome. Why would he do that unless he wanted us to understand there's always the dignity of the person and the hope that remains in their heart, which we have to try and find and build on. And he actually said something like, "But for the grace of God, it might be me in here, not you."
And obviously he was in charge of the Catholic Church, he was leader of the Catholic Church at a really difficult time in human history. You might say many people would look to the way the world is now compared to, 13 years ago, and say possibly a more dangerous time now, certainly more divided.
Yeah.
Did he rise to those occasions, do you think? Was he able to say what he wanted to say, to hold political leaders perhaps to some ways to account and to spread that message?
I think he was very perceptive, actually, in when to push and when to prod, when to give a strong message, when to be patient. His commitment to the individual and to the people on the edges of society was unquestioned. But he also fashioned that in a way directed to those who hold the power and generate the wealth. So, for example, he said, if you want to know how good your economy is, ask an unemployed person. So, in other words, there's nothing wrong with running a successful economy. There's nothing wrong with creating wealth. There's nothing wrong with having ambition. But you've got to judge it not from your own point of view, but from the point of view of what's its purpose. What is the purpose of these things, which should be to the enhancement of the community and of the least privileged?
What does the new Pope need to do, the next person to step into those incredible shoes in that position, when it comes to just the way the world is now?
Well, I think the possibly most dangerous thing in the world today is the notion that everything can be analysed, discussed in sound bites. And I think what Pope Francis has started in the Church over the last 3 years, which is to call us to a more disciplined way of listening to each other. Listening not in order to disagree or to argue, but listening to each other in order to understand, and out of an exchange of understanding to come up with a better way forward. I think that's a very, very important thing, both in the political world, in relationships within families, in industrial relationships. Conflict is not a way of progress on the whole.
The Catholic Church obviously goes through now a period of mourning.
Yes.
And you will be taking part in Conclave.
Yeah.
What are you expecting from that? What are you hoping from it? Do you have any, will you be going into it with an idea in your mind of who to vote for or who to look out for?
Well, I think the mourning is important, and that's something that probably everybody understands. And that's a process, especially when seen through the eyes of faith, of not just lamenting a loss, but also grasping that this person who has died has not gone into oblivion. They've gone to the fullness of life, summoned by the voice of God, and therefore retain a maybe refreshed way of staying in communion, in touch with us and participating. So I think that's a process of mourning, a process of deciding what might follow. I'm quite excited about, actually. I've not experienced this, not on this scale, but I would imagine that once the doors of the Sistine Chapel and its enclave close, that what will be there will not be a kind of heavy, speculative, divided process, but something that is much more attentive to the promptings of God. And they can, therefore, each person to discern, and then they can come in all sorts of ways, just an odd phrase, a conversation, a sense of a movement among a group of people. But it won't be conflictual, I hope. It will be looking for a shared way forward in the perception of what does the world, what does the church, what do we as a group of people think is the next step to take. No pope is the ultimate answer. And it's the next step that we look for, rather than the Messiah. The Messiah we know, his name is Jesus.
Could there be possibly a British pope at the end of this process?
I doubt it. I doubt it. I mean, there are 3 cardinals who will be voting. I'm too old, thank God. The odds are, very, very long on that happening. I don't think so.
And just lastly, can I ask your own personal memories, just you as a man of God, having met him, I know a number of times working with him within this space. What will you be thinking of, and who will you be thinking of as you go through this mourning process and the conclave process? Well,
I met him once when he spoke to me very profoundly about the peace that he retained or was continually given to him. So that was very, very moving. When you think of the pressure that a pope is under, he said, in all of this, I've never lost an inner peace. So in other words, he probably has a good night's sleep, which I don't always manage, I have to confess. The second thing was his liveliness and his sense of fun, actually. I told him once I'd been to Argentina, and immediately he said, did you go to Luján? Now, it's a particular place in Argentina. It's a shrine of Our Blessed Lady. It's a place where many Argentinians go to be baptized. But that was the heart of his perception. Then probably the second question he might have asked me is, did I see his favourite football team play football? But I didn't. I did go to Luján, but not see his football team.